Now let me get ready for Jeremy Lin. I have the right height to do this. Okay. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jeremy Lin. Every time I think about you, Jeremy, there are two words that come into my mind. One is Linsanity, and the other is Christianity. And I wonder whether you could say a little bit about what happened, really, because with Linsanity, I mean, it was an extraordinary moment. 2012, I think it was, you were in the New York Knicks, and you just outperformed yourself and everybody else, and you were instantly an overnight star. You were a sensation. Everybody heard about you, including people that didn't play basketball. And then you were really, really famous. So my question is, what happened? How did it happen? Why do you think it happened? And does your faith have anything to do with it? Is there a relationship between Linsanity and Christianity?
Yeah, that's, for me, definitely they're intertwined. I actually went home after that season. I went back. I wrote a list of, I think it was 12 or 13 things that had to have happened in order for Linsanity to happen. And every single one of these things on the list were things that were outside of my control. And so, when you talk about, I think a lot of you guys would attest to this as well. There's definitely things in your life that maybe too good to be a coincidence, or you feel like, there was a divine something that had some control over it. One of the things, for example, is both my parents are 5'6" and I'm 6'3", so I'm 9 inches taller than both my parents. I'm much taller than both of my brothers, and I think 60 or 70 pounds heavier than the next closest person in my family. And so things like that, right? Like if I wasn't my size, my weight, my height, I wouldn't have been able to make the NBA. But again, these are things that are out of my control. Like you can eat and drink milk all you want, but your height is going to be your height, as you can tell.
I'm standing up here again. Is that your answer?
Yes, so that was my answer. So definitely there's a link. Obviously there are other things that I had in my control as well, in terms of like being able to play. The way I played was very different than my rookie year, just being able to play with a fearlessness and a faith in God, which allowed me to stop worrying about maybe what every fan or journalist may think about me.
Right. And did that, when that Linsanity thing happened, I mean, did you try to think, what on earth is God doing in my life? Did you
for sure
try to work that out?
And after, and the time after, which is what I'm going to get to today. But definitely many times in my life where I'm like, God, what are you doing, or what are you up to? And definitely, specifically with Linsanity, it was one of those things where I was just mind blown. It was, look, you guys were shocked. Trust me, you guys weren't as shocked as I was. Like, I was going home after the games, and I was like, I can't believe this just happened. I would go onto ESPN, and I was like front page of ESPN, which was a big deal at that time because it was like ESPN. That's the website I always grew up going to, and then my phone was like 200, 300 text messages after every game. It was just like insane.
It was insane and insane indeed. So, we brought you here to Hong Kong to speak, not just because you're a great basketball player, and certainly not because you went to Harvard, but because we think that you are a great role model for our students. And in this age where there's so much fake news and all that kind of stuff, we thought it'd be great to have you share from your heart, a sort of real Jeremy Lin kind of sharing kind of thing. And I know you have many important things that you really want to share with us today. So I'm going to give the platform over to you now to share with us about where you are, your life, from a very real, heartfelt perspective.
Cool.
So ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Lin.
I just want to first say thank you for the honor to be able to speak here. I hear this is the Harvard of Hong Kong. Yes, no? And I also, that's very evident because I don't have a translator at the other events that I'm speaking at. There's a translator because maybe people don't understand English, but apparently, you guys are all good if I use English, correct? Just double checking. Okay, cool. You guys watch the NBA Finals? Who are you rooting for? Split crowd. I see a Golden State. Hey man, next time you can't wear a Stephen Curry shirt to a Jeremy Lin event. But seriously, it's a pleasure to be here. I haven't been back to Hong Kong since 3 years ago, and so the goal of today is I'm just going to kind of share with you guys what I learned this past season, and that's something that I do every year. This is going to be hard. I'm going to try to look back every once in a while. I've never really had a 360-degree audience, but I'll definitely try to look back every once in a while. But what's that? Keep spinning? I'll do my best. Speed move. My knee. But yeah, so if we think back to last year, obviously the main thing that I'm going to talk about is my injury. And so I would say that the injury really asked a lot of tough questions. But the main question that I had to ask myself is, what will my life look like now? And I think, there's always been two catalysts in my life that have really basically encouraged me to ask these tough questions. Like, what does my life look like? What is my life purpose? What is my quality of life? These type of tough questions. Number one is when you get what you want. So for me, that was Linsanity. When I experienced Linsanity, I had to ask a lot of questions. Is this everything I wanted? Is this enough? And similarly, on the flip side, when you don't get what you want, which in this case is the injury, you have to really ask yourself the same type of tough questions. And so if I could summarize what I'm going to share today, it would be that the one thing I have learned is a relationship with God has given me tremendous rest and tremendous joy, even in the midst of my greatest setbacks. And so that's any time that you're unsure of what I'm saying, you can always kind of go back to that theme. And so going on to this injury, in order for me to properly give you guys the injury and the devastation of it, you have to first understand context, because the context of it is everything. And so I guess the story for me starts, 6 years ago. And, for those of you guys who don't know me, I am an extremely ambitious person, and ever since I was a little kid, all I ever wanted to do was to be great at basketball. And I remember I was preparing this talk, and I was sitting down on the computer trying to figure out some stuff, type some stuff out, and I literally couldn't explain just how bad I want to be great at basketball. Like, it's not something that I can just stand up here and tell you, like, oh, I want to be great at basketball, and you guys are like, cool, got it. Like, it's hard for me to fully convey that to you. And I think aside from the health of my family and my close friends and things like that, like, there isn't really anything else that I've ever really wanted more than to be great at basketball. And so the story kind of starts in New York with Linsanity. And I remember in that moment, I was like, finally, you guys can see what I'm capable of, because the year before was a rough year. And I remember I was literally the most popular person on the planet, actually. Like the number one most Googled person in that entire year, which is pretty amazing. And it was like me, and in second place was Psy from Gangnam Style. So it was a good year for the Asians. But I remember overnight, it just seemed like the organization, my teammates, the fans from New York, it seemed like they betrayed me or they turned on me. And, I remember thinking to myself, you know what? Just wait. I'm going to train, and you're going to see what happens. And I remember in that summer, there were times where I would train up to 3 times a day, which is not healthy. Don't do that. That's called overtraining. And that's, but that's how bad I wanted it. And so I went to Houston, and I was there for 2 years. And in Houston, it was tough because I lost my starting position. I had a turnover, a really bad turnover in the playoffs. And I remember in those moments, during those 2 years, specifically after that playoff game as well, I remember being laughed at and mocked on a global scale. And I remember not signing on to my social media, not wanting to go on to ESPN, not wanting to go on any of the websites I normally go to. All these sports websites were all reporting the same thing, a lot of hate coming my way. And I remember in that moment, you guys have social media. If one person trolls your page or your post, you might get mad. Imagine the world doing that. Seriously. Like, if one person misunderstands you, it may really, when you get misunderstood, even one comment or one person, it bothers you. But for me, it was everybody. It was the world. And I remember asking God, I said, why would you give me Linsanity just to take it away? Like, it seemed like a setup. And during those 2 years in Houston, I lived with my trainer. And my trainer described those 2 years as this. He said, after a bad game, I was so scared to talk to you. We would just go home and play Dota without talking. That's all I remember about Houston. And that's a pretty sad but true depiction of where I was in my life. And during that summer, I remember I said, you know what, just wait. Just wait. I'm going to train. I'm going to come back a different person, and I'm going to show you guys what's up. And I remember that summer, or one of the summers, my trainer got married in Hawaii, and the morning of his wedding, I was in the wedding party, and so everyone had, their suits or their outfits, and they're getting flowers, and they're setting up for the wedding. Everyone's running in and out of the house, and I'm over there outside the house doing defensive slides, plyos, sprints up the hill, and watch out, like they're coming through with the cake or whatever it is, and I'm literally running and training. But that was my level of obsession that I had for greatness. And I remember I got traded to LA. And I got the call while I was in Beijing. So the call came from my agent at 3 a.m. And so he woke me up. He's like, man, you just got traded. And I was like, where? He's like, the Lakers. And I was so happy because I was like, this is my moment. I can get out of Houston. I'm going to a place that needs a starting point guard, and I can show the world what I can do. I can be great at basketball again. And so from 3 to 5, I was basically just jumping around hysterically in my hotel room yelling. And literally for 2 hours, it was just me. I woke up my family and my trainer. I made everyone come over to my room, and we were just yelling. And then I went to go eat breakfast, and then I went straight to the gym at 7 a.m. And I was like, this is my moment. And we all know how that season went. We were a national joke. We were literally the joke of the league. We won 20 games, and I remember there were times where I didn't want to show my face in LA. I didn't even want to go outside my house because it was embarrassing to play for the Lakers at that time. Just such a prestigious organization, won so many championships. For me to walk around was not what I wanted to do. And I remember during that season, there were so many sleepless flights. There were so many sleepless nights. I'd be up at 4:30, 5 in the morning, couldn't sleep. Pull out the iPad, watch some film, just my mind tossing and turning. And there was just so much angst and pain. And, again, similar questions. God, how could you do this to me? Do you love me? Why would you basically set me up for this? And I remember in that summer, I was like, you know what? It's cool. Just wait. I'm going to train. And I remember I would train even times until I was lightheaded. Has anyone ever done that? It takes a lot to train until you're lightheaded, but that's the level of ambition. That's the level of want that I had, and again, the next season going to Charlotte, we made the playoffs. We had a pretty good run. We lost in the first round, but that whole season, I kept thinking to myself, I'm a backup point guard for this team. I'm not a backup. I can do more. I can be great, and so I kept telling myself, deep down inside, it was I know I can do more than what I can do here. And so again, a big summer, and finally in that summer, I signed with the Brooklyn Nets. And I signed with a coach that I had worked with on the Knicks. And I was like, this is legitimately that opportunity that I've been waiting for. And I remember I signed a contract, and I was like, all you fools who counted me out, you're about to eat your words. And I remember I was just so excited for the season, and the season came around, and boom, 3 straight hamstring injuries. I had never hurt my hamstring before. I didn't even know what a hamstring really was. Like, I didn't even know you could hurt this muscle in the back. But that season, I hurt it 3 times. I missed over 50 games. And I remember feeling a tremendous sense of underachievement. And every year I have this Asia trip, which I'm on right now, where I come back, I say hi to all the fans. And I remember during that season last year, 2 years ago in Brooklyn, I didn't even want to come back to Asia because I was like, man, I come back, I go through the airports, all the fans come to the airport, all the fans go to my events, they mob me, they send me gifts, and I'm like, I don't deserve that. I have nothing to show for. I have underachieved my whole career. You guys may think that this is what I'm capable of, but I know I'm capable of more. And I remember thinking, I don't want to come back. I don't want to come back until I've really done what I know I can do. And again, I thought to myself, there's more. Just wait, just wait, just wait. And so at that moment, I said, if I could choose a year, any year for my career to relive, which one would I choose? And I couldn't honestly say I would choose any of them, not even New York, because in New York, it was a quick 20-game, 25-game stretch. But the other, 50 games, I didn't even play. The coach didn't even use me. And so for me, I was like, I want a full season where I can just be myself. And at that moment, since Linsanity, it had been 5 years. 5 years of waiting, 5 years of being mocked, 5 years of people saying a lot of negative things about me. And maybe the people here are very positive. Maybe Hong Kong embraces me. But there are a lot of people in the U.S. that were really, really coming for my neck. And the average NBA career is 4.5 years. And so if you think about it, 5 years is a long time. Like, we play from maybe early 20s to early 30s, and then we never can play professional sports again. So we have a very short lifespan. So 5 years, you're talking about the average NBA career. That's the average entirety of an NBA career. And, but again, I was just like, I'm gonna fight through. I'm confused, but I'm gonna keep fighting through. And so that's what kind of is the context for opening night of this past season. Finally, I'm going into my second year, and again, the coach is a great coach. I'm a starting point guard. Everything on paper is lined up for it to be what I think it should be and could be. And so on opening night, I go up for a layup, come down on my right leg, and boom, my patellar tendon gone. And I remember I landed, and like right now, for my knee or your leg, like you can straighten your leg. Like when I landed, I tried to straighten my leg, but I couldn't. My leg was just dangling, and it was stuck like this. And I remember this whole thing, all I could feel was a bunch of warmth. It was super hot. It was like it was like almost felt like a microwave or something like that. And I remember the fear. And so we were in Indiana. We flew back to Brooklyn. And when I landed in Brooklyn, I have a picture of my knee, but it's 3 to 4 times the size of a normal knee. And like if you just smack it, it was like a big thing of liquid or jello. Like it would just like the whole thing would jiggle. And I remember when I looked at my knee, like I had a sleeve on, but I couldn't even put the sleeve on anymore because my knee was so big. And I remember I just broke down crying. Like I just started crying. My teammates started to exit the plane because they wanted to give me some space. My head coach came down, stood right next to me and gave me a hug. I gave him a hug. I was crying, and I remember telling him, because I'm really close to my head coach, and I remember telling him, man, I'm sorry. Like this is the second year in a row. This is the second year in a row that I can't be there for you. I can't go to battle with you. And so if you understand the context of the injury, I think it gives you a deeper insight into the devastation of the injury. And so from the airport back to my apartment, it's a 45-minute drive. And so as I get into the car and I know I'm done for the season, I'm thinking to myself, just a lot of thoughts, the craziest thoughts, emotion everywhere. And I remember in that car ride, I was still crying. I was still thinking to myself, and I was like, you know, a lot of us, we go through highs and lows. All of us go through highs and lows, but I was thinking about my career, and I was like, yeah, there's maybe a couple highs. There's Linsanity, maybe a couple good games sprinkled in there, but 95% of my career has been lows. And it's been a lot of pain. It's been a lot of heartache. And I know you guys are looking at me like, dude, you're in the NBA. Like, we're proud of you. Like, we're glad you're an ambassador for Asian basketball players. But from my standpoint, like, I know I can do more. And so when I think about my career, I think about it as just a whole bunch of lows with maybe 1 or 2 spikes. And that's it. And I, was thinking to myself, if my career ended today, I don't think I would even want my career. Like, I wouldn't be very proud of my career. It's not something that I would cherish, that I want to show to my kids or something like that. Like, that's kind of my honest assessment today of my career thus far. And I remember, I am thankful in that I haven't experienced any tremendous tragedy in terms of, losing any family members or things like that. But up until this point, today, this is the worst setback of my life and of my career that I've ever experienced. And the worst part about it is it's in my prime. An NBA player ages 27 to 29, that's your prime. That's when you play the best. And my time from 27 to 29, I have just spent being hurt. And I remember on that car ride home, I was just crying out to God, just pouring my heart out. And I remember just crying up to God and saying, why? Why me? Why me? Why? Why does something always have to happen? I've worked so hard. I know I've worked hard. I work harder than so many other players. I do the right things. I take care of my body. Why? Right? And I remember it's like 2 straight off seasons, 6 straight months, every single day, working, getting better, training, only to not be able to participate. It's like studying half a year for a test, and the morning of the test, you don't even get to take it. And I remember thinking to myself and just crying out to God, why does it have to be so hard? Why does it have to be so hard? And as the car ride began to end, I was still praying, and I started to feel a peace in my heart. And I started to feel myself really trusting God. And I remember as I was pulling up, I was basically saying, you know what, God, if this is the route you want me to take, I will do it faithfully. And so I went upstairs, and my family was there. My trainer was there. I gave everybody a hug. And then we just played Dota. And I think, the most surprising thing to me and my family is just, if you were in that room, if you were with me the next day, you would have never known anything had happened. Because after that 45-minute car ride back, it was like I was on to the next thing. I was able to turn the page and just have a very joyful, restful heart. So again, going back to the theme of this talk, it's I did have a restful heart. I did have joy. But it was a huge, huge surprise to me. And it was such a stark contrast from who I was before. And, I think back, how could someone like me, who in Houston couldn't even handle one bad game, how was I able to turn the page and recover from this injury so quickly and return to a state of rest and joy? And honestly, it's a relationship with God. And that's that, and I'll flesh that out a little bit, but that's really what has carried me through this injury and this rehab process as I'm still rehabbing today, 8 months later. It's not like I'm 100% today. I'm still working my way to get back. And so, that's the one thing that I really learned this past season is with God, with faith, my greatest obstacle won't be able to stop me from living with joy. And I think that's something that is extremely encouraging to myself, and hopefully is an encouragement to you guys, that as you look around and as you think about your own life, there are things and there are times where you may feel helpless and hopeless. But the one thing I can say standing before you guys today is I'm living proof that even in your greatest nightmares, even in your greatest setbacks, there is still a chance to live with joy. And, I talk a lot about a relationship with God, and for me, God's love has always been one of the things that has really carried me through, because what they say is perfect love casts out fear. And so on that car ride back, during that time in Houston when I had a bad game and I had that turnover, during that time in LA when everyone was laughing at us and everyone was laughing at me, and we were on all the Instagram pages being mocked on a national scale, during all those times, it seems like God's love is just that one thing that I'm clinging on to. It's like I'm hanging on by a thread, but God's love is still better and bigger than anything this world can offer. It's like when you have a bad performance or whatever, there are times when I had a really bad game, and then I would come out of the locker room and my mom would just give me a hug, and it's like in that moment, I really felt like, hey, my mom just loves me for me. I didn't have to hit the game winner. I didn't have to win tonight. She still loved me. And I think that's what it's like with God's love, is because I experienced, even in my height of heights in Linsanity, I still had an emptiness about that. Like I thought it was going to be amazing, and it was amazing, but it wasn't as fulfilling as even the time of injury when I really felt God's presence and I really felt God's love. And so that's one thing that, appreciate it. And so that's one thing that, I just want to impress upon you guys. And the second thing is that I feel like God is fully powerful. Like another thing that I really hang on to is that God always has a perfect plan for me. I've seen that over and over again. I kind of alluded to it earlier when I said there's 12 or 13 things that had to have happened, but I'll give you another story. Is people think and talk a lot about Linsanity. 6 weeks before Linsanity, I was on the Houston Rockets, and they brought me to training camp, and there were 5 other point guards there, which basically means if you're not one of the top few, you're not making the team. And so I remember I was cleaning out my locker room. I took all my clothes and my shoes out of my locker. I walked out. I called my agent, and I said, I'm done. Tell the Rockets to cut me. I'm not playing for them anymore. And that's a true story. And he, spent a lot of time on the phone with me, maybe like a couple hours or whatever, and was like talking me through it, and was basically like, hey, you have to go back for practice tonight. Like, we can't quit. That's gonna, you can't quit. You've come too far. You can't give up. So you can imagine the embarrassment that I had when I had to bring back my shoes and my clothes into the locker room. But even in that situation, 6 weeks later was Linsanity, and I was a toast of the world. But had I given up, I never would have reached that point. And that's another example of how God has a perfect plan, and he has often and always used my greatest failures and my greatest setbacks as ways for me to grow as a person. And in many ways, the things that have helped me the most are my greatest points of failure. And I think that's something that even in an injury, I can always rely on, is like, God, I know you're teaching me. I know that there's a lesson here, and I trust you because your love. If God didn't love me, I wouldn't trust him. If my parents don't love me, I wouldn't trust them. But God has continually shown that for me in my life. And that's why I keep going back to, a relationship with God allows you to fight through even your greatest setbacks. And I don't want to, sit here and say like, oh, if, every single person here has a relationship with God, they're going to experience Linsanity in their lives. That's not the point. The point isn't that, circumstantially everything is going to be perfect, or even circumstantially that things will get better. The point is more that even as you experience your inevitable setbacks, even in your greatest moments of weakness, you will still find joy. And that's the lesson that I have learned. And so, I just want to kind of highlight maybe one word in that one-liner that I gave you in the beginning, and that word is rest. What does rest look like? And maybe this is something that I had to really ask myself, and maybe something that, as I share right now, you guys can kind of think about for your own lives. But for me, if your heart is at rest, you are defined by joy and peace. right? You live with joy and peace. On the flip side, on the contrary, if your heart is not at rest, you live with tremendous fear, worry, and stress. And I think for me, it's very clear because I was able to see myself before the injury, and I was able to see myself after the injury. I was able to see myself in Houston, I was able to see myself in LA, and I was able to see myself in Brooklyn. And just the difference between the two. And this injury to me, and honestly, my whole career, seems like I am stuck in this glass case. Let's say there's a glass case around here, and I see everybody else walking by this glass case. And they're walking by, they're moving along in their life, they're accomplishing different things, they're improving, they're getting promotions or whatever the case may be, and they're just happily going on the path of life. And I am stuck in this glass case just looking out at everybody else walking their journey. And the worst part is I'm in a glass case, so everybody can look in and see me, and they can look in and laugh at me, and they can look in and see that you are stuck in the same place. And that is how I felt for a very long time, is that even in my failures, if you have a bad day at work, you have a bad day at work. If I have a bad day at work, millions of people will see it. And I think this injury, millions and millions of people saw it, right? And I think so for me, that has always been a really tough situation, is my weaknesses and my lows are highlighted and magnified on a global scale, and that has always been extremely difficult for me to handle. But even in that moment of feeling like this is the ultimate glass case, this injury, even in that moment and feeling all that lost time that I've had taken off my career, now including this past year, it's been 6 years since Linsanity that I've been waiting. Even in those 6 years of me standing in this glass case, I can sit here and tell you I am living with tremendous joy, and every single day from the 45 minutes after I landed in Brooklyn until today, if you ask the people around me, it's like they would never have known. I am just going through life very grateful, filled with joy, filled with peace, and filled with rest. And I think as I'm approaching this next season, a lot of people are asking me the same question. Are you afraid of injuring your knee again? Are you afraid that you'll never be the same? Are you afraid that you've missed your prime? And I think for me, having a relationship with God has given me rest, and this rest has also given me a newfound boldness. And there's an analogy that people often talk about in the game of basketball, is if a team is up 10 points in the fourth quarter, oftentimes in order for that team to win the game, they must continue playing to win the game. But oftentimes what we see is that team starts to play to not lose, right? And so they're playing to protect their lead versus playing to grow their lead. And so when you play not to lose, that is oftentimes when the other team comes back and catches up and eventually probably wins the game. And so for me, what does this boldness look like? This boldness looks like I'm not playing to not lose. I'm not playing so that I don't get hurt again. I am playing to become my full potential on the court. It's a positive attacking mindset that I am approaching next season, but that boldness is not something that I have always lived with. It's not even something that I can say comes from within. It's something that for me, a relationship with God and having a restful heart has given me that ability to continue to play to win, even though everything around me and all my circumstances are telling me, you might get hurt again, or you should be afraid of this, or you should be afraid of that, or it's the beginning of the end for you. And I think for you guys, a quick test that you can have is if you live with a fearful heart, if you are constantly asking, what if, right? What if this didn't happen? What if I stayed in New York? What if I didn't get injured? What if something happens next year when I come back and my knee goes again? But when you're living in a place of peace, when you're living in a place of joy, you start to ask, what now? Okay, that happened. That's fine. What now? I got injured. What now? What is my focus now? And so that's a big test for you guys, or a big barometer of where you're at in your life today. If you're constantly asking, what if, or versus if you're constantly asking, what now? And you can apply that to many different things, right? And I know Hong Kong is a great place, but I also know Hong Kong is a tough place to grow up, and there are a different set of challenges here. I know that there's, at times, a lot of hopelessness with people going through life, and then maybe they get a great job, or maybe they get what they want, but they realize, oh, that's not enough. I don't feel it, or maybe it's the price of real estate that is going up right now, and it's just extremely difficult to find a piece of land for you to start your own family, right? Maybe it's not understanding. Maybe there's this cloud of uncertainty of not knowing what your future holds. Maybe it's things to do with political affairs, with governmental issues or other things like that. There are many issues in Hong Kong, and there is a great cloud of uncertainty over a lot of you guys, like there is a great cloud of uncertainty over me as I go into next season and come back from a big-time injury. But the one thing I continue to hold on to as I come back is I'm fully protected by God and His perfect plan. And I know that because I've been through my worst nightmares from a career standpoint. Like my greatest fears were losing my starting position, losing my fans, losing a game for my team on national television, getting hurt and having a big-time injury. All these things have happened. And in all these situations, in all these circumstances, God's love has continued to carry me through and give me hope. And so I'm not saying everything will be easy, but I can at least say my heart is genuinely at rest. And so for you guys, something to ask yourself is, are you defined by worry and stress? What is your definition of adversity? Because sometimes if we think about what our definition of adversity is, we realize, wow, we're living in fear. We're living in stress. Think about your day today or the last week. Like, what are the things that really get you riled up? Maybe a coworker said something. Maybe a student said something. But how many people out there are going through much bigger issues? And so that's something I had to ask myself is, I'm playing in the NBA, in the greatest league in the world, getting paid millions of dollars, and my definition of adversity is something very, very marginal. And that for a long time, for many years in my career, I was living in a place of fear. And I was afraid to mess up, and I was afraid to get criticized. And then on the other side is, are you living with tremendous peace? Are you living with tremendous joy? Because if your heart is at rest, you are grateful. You are grateful for the small things. Are you guys grateful for waking up today? Are you guys grateful that your right knee isn't blown like mine? Am I grateful for a lot of things that I have that I can't see? Right? There's times where even, I'm going to be honest, as I go on my Asia trip and there's a lot of fans, there are times where I'm like, oh, not now, please. Like another picture, another autograph, like it's really tiring. And I had to catch myself and be like, be grateful, right? Like a restful heart is grateful for even the little things. And so that's something that you guys can continue to ask yourself is, are you grateful? And I think if you have a restful and grateful heart, the inevitable byproduct of that is overflow. And what I mean by that is you live radically, you live outwardly, you live generously, you live through service. And, for me, it always kind of goes back to Jesus' love, is Jesus' love fills my cup, but it not only fills my cup, it allows me to overflow to the people around me. And you can't overflow if you don't have enough for yourself. So if your heart is not at a place of rest, you cannot overflow into the people around you. And so after my injury, I was coming back from the hospital the day after, and I went straight to the Apple store. And I went to the Apple store because the night before, when my brother was watching on TV that I got hurt, he threw his phone on the ground, and he shattered his screen. And so I went to the Apple store, and I got him an iPhone, literally straight from the hospital. And the driver that took me to the hospital and back was the same driver I always have, and I'm pretty close with him. And I saw his phone was kind of beat up too, so I got him an iPhone. And then I just bought 2 more iPhones because I was like, you know what? There are oftentimes like maybe it's a ball boy, or maybe it's an intern, or maybe it's a security guard or a janitor. Then sometimes I look at their phone, I'm like, oh, it's kind of beat up. I got to give one to you. But that was literally the morning after the toughest injury I've ever had in my life. And I'm not sitting here trying to be like, oh, look at me, I'm such an angel or whatever, like, oh, I'm so great. It's not that. It's that God's love is more than enough for me, and it allows me to live and serve the people around me. And so again, even in the midst of your greatest adversity, like God's love is going to give you a restful and overflowing heart. And, you know, I always try to think about analogies. This is one analogy that I want to pose to you guys is a lot of us live our lives as iPhones. So we wake up and you have, you know, a solid battery charge. And through the day, your battery charge gets less and less and less. Someone annoys you. I had a tough, you know, workout, or I had a long day at work. Battery goes lower and lower. And then at some point, it gets red and it comes on, low battery, 20%. And then it gets lower and lower. And what I think is there's a lot of people here that are actually living on low battery every day, living on fumes, just trying to make it, just trying to survive. No room, no extra to overflow. Not a restful heart, filled with fear, imprisoned by fear. Right? And what I like to pose to you guys is what happens if you guys could live as external chargers? Like external chargers, the nice ones that can charge multiple phones at once, right? What happens if you guys could live your life like that? You don't have to be an iPhone on low battery. Actually, you can be an external charger and you can charge the people around you. But you can only do that if you're connected to a power source. And so for me, being connected to God has given me a chance to be an external charger for the people around me. And this past season, I spent more time caring and loving and serving the people around me than I ever have. And again, it's not because of me. Like, this is not coming from me. An external charger would be dumb to brag about, like, oh, I'm an external charger. I charge people, because it's like, yeah, you're going to run out too if you're not connected to a power source. The real person that should be getting the glory is the power source. And so for me, I would do things that I've never really spent that much time doing before. I was texting my teammates, calling my coaches. I remember we would go meet up with my team. We were playing the Warriors, and I basically was like, I felt like a therapist. I was just like meeting with teammates and coaches and hearing their problems and helping them work through it and giving them encouragement. I remember I spent more time with homeless people this last season than I probably ever have. And I remember even in Vancouver while I was doing my rehab, I would be walking down the street, and maybe somebody that I would never notice before, I started to notice them and be like, hey, maybe he needs food. But for me, it's like easy to give a couple dollars. It's easy to get them food. I actually started trying to do things even outside of my comfort zone, which is to sit down with them, take them into a restaurant, ask them how they're doing, actually have a meal with them. And quite honestly, it's hard. Like, it's embarrassing at times, you know, like, because people are kind of looking around at you, and you know, there's a social stigma with all that. And so, but for me, that was my overflow. That was my ability that even in the midst of my greatest setback, because I was connected to a power source, I was able to continue to charge the people around me. And so lots of tough questions that I asked myself, and I'm about to wrap up, a lot of tough questions that I had to ask myself, and hopefully you guys are also asking these tough questions to yourself. And the one thing I can say is suffering is inevitable. Like, it's going to come your way at some point. The goal of life is not to find a life with the least resistance. The goal is to find out how you are going to fight through and get through that resistance, that setback, that obstacle. How are you going to get through that, but also in a way where you are living joyfully and restfully? And so one verse that really meant a lot to me that we're going to pull up on the screen is Matthew 11:28-30. It says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And if you look carefully at the verse is not saying that you won't be tired. The verse is saying that when you are tired, you can find rest. And again, going back to my injury, it's like, the equivalent of my injury will come everybody's way at some point. So you will feel tired, you will feel sad, but even in those moments, I continue to encourage everyone, like, for me, I was able to find rest. And so, you know, I just think that There are people here who are tired of running the race of life. There are people that are living on empty battery. There are people who feel like they're in a glass case. And there are people that are just trying to survive. And for me, that was me for a long time. And I lived that life, even though on the outside looking in, my life was perfect. I've done a lot of amazing things in my career in terms of things that have never been done before, and having that chance to, blaze a different path and pioneer a different trail. But even in those moments, even in my highest moments of greatest worldly achievements, I have felt very much on empty battery. And even in my lowest of lows, a relationship with God has given me an extremely restful and joyful heart. And that's why I offered to come before you guys today and share my story. If I wasn't at a place of rest and peace, there's no way I would be up here talking about my injury. And so thank you guys for taking the time. That's just want to share a little bit of my heart.
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for sharing right from your heart. It's an amazing story. It strikes me that you have found something that everyone is looking for, but somehow, it's as if you found the most precious thing, and you're sharing it with us, and you want everybody else to find it. I mean, that's really your heart here, right? It's amazing.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it was tough to prepare because, I explain this to the people. My business team is just every time I share or write it, it feels like I lose a piece of my heart. It's like I'm taking a piece of my heart out and I'm giving it out. And so, but I think it's something that, I feel very strongly like that I should share, and hopefully you guys are encouraged by it.
Right, I think everyone should ponder this very carefully. Jeremy, and maybe I can just ask a very quick question. Something very deep must have happened in that 45-minute car journey, right? From the airport to your home, right? That completely, transformed your life almost suddenly, right? So can you share a little bit about what happened? Was God speaking to you, or you had some revelation, or was it just, you were just crying? What was going on there?
It wasn't like a supernatural voice or anything like that. It was just more like there's a wrestling process. And I've always found that faith is not something that, it's not like you go to a store and it's an exchange and you just pick it off the shelf. Like, it's something that you really have to wrestle for, fight for, pursue. And for me, it's oftentimes we go through our lives and we train and we train and we train, and when you're in the moment, it's hard to really see, maybe any growth. It's like when you are living with, I live next door to my nephew, and so it's hard for me to see him get taller, but then when I go away for a long time and I come back, I'm like, dang. And I would say that car ride, there was definitely a wrestling process, but even in the midst of it, it was like when I was able to, by the end of the car ride, I just felt a tremendous peace. I was like, oh, wow, like, yeah, steps have been made, progress has been made. I have matured to some degree, or God has given me another level of peace in my heart. And I think, sadly, it took an injury for me to realize that, but I guess that was definitely a tumultuous car ride.
Thank you so much for your sharing, Jeremy. God bless you. And my friend couldn't make it, sending her love. So I just want to ask, the level of obsession that you describe about your training in basketball, like, how does that work in your head, that basketball doesn't become your God?
That's a great question. That is, honestly, that is kind of the golden question for me, is something that I always have to continually check in my heart, is that I am not replacing God with basketball. Even though, and I think the way I've always seen it, as I used to just see my life as a bunch of different buckets, like you had basketball, school, family, God, but the older I get, I see it more as an umbrella, as God is this umbrella and all the buckets go underneath. And so constantly having to check my heart that one of these subcategories is not becoming that umbrella. And I think that's something that is, again, that's probably, when I say the wrestling process or the fighting process, it's really that of, it's ironic because at the same time you pour everything you have, but the harder and the more that you pour into something, the harder it is to let go of it. And I think that's what faith has really taught me is the more that I invest and the more time that I wait and the more hours I spend in the gym, it is harder and harder to let go and trust God with the end result. But that is what, I have to do, and that is to some degree what I'm learning to do, and the injury is yet another example of that.
Thank you. A question here.
Hi, Jeremy. So many thanks for your sharing. And I have one question, is how do you deal with the relationship with your teammate? Like you have to cooperate with each other, but if you want to play on the court, you also have to compete with each other. How do you deal with the relationship?
I think it's a lot easier when you like them. And I really like my teammates. And that's the one thing that I can say about Brooklyn is we have a lot of high character guys, and our locker room is extremely close. And that is very evident if you walked into our training any given day. I'm coming over here and I have teammates like, hey, FaceTime me from Asia. I want to see what it's like. And I think having that level of relationship with your teammates, it's easy to root for each other. And you compete a lot on a day-to-day basis in terms of practice, but you also know that you're competing at the end of the day to push each other because you're on this same ship, basically. You're trying to move this ship forward as far as you can, but you guys have to go through some interpersonal conflict in practice to get there, and that's totally okay.
Okay, thank you.
Question here.
Hi, Jeremy. I've seen your documentary Linsanity 100 times. I remember
That's more than I've seen it.
Nobody thought he could play. He had to fight for everything that he got. Already cut twice this season, sleeping at his teammate's couch because he got nowhere else to go.
Wow, you are reciting.
And suddenly, Jeremy Lin is the toast of Manhattan. I'm a big fan, a super huge fan.
I see that. That's amazing.
So you inspire me a lot, and I'm really looking forward to your comeback return next season. So I have two questions. The first one is, how's your strategy different for the next season? And the second one is, because many say that Warriors are making basketball losing its charm because they're too strong, and you already know the end before the game ends. What do you think?
Well, first off, that first question was extremely leading. You are heavily implying that I need to change things about my game. But I agree. One thing that we've worked on this entire year in my rehab process, we're not just focusing on the knee, we've refocused on being able to move completely differently. So the way I stand, the way I sit, the way I walk upstairs, the way I run, jump, shoot, everything is different, everything is healthier. I'm not going to bore you with the details of, moving proximally or sinking into your glutes instead of being, heavily dependent on your tendons and your knees. Like, there's a lot of scientific things, but I have a tremendous rehab team around me, and so there will definitely be differences in the way that I move, but the way that I play will still be downhill attacking to the rim because that's who I am, and that's kind of what I was saying earlier is if I'm afraid to do that, then I don't really have an identity as a basketball player. So the one thing I can say is I will continue to attack and go downhill, but it will be, with safer movements. And then your second question. Oh, yeah, the one about the Warriors. One of my high school teachers always told me the best thing about sports, the most captivating thing about sports, why everyone loves sports, is because you have to play the game, because you don't know what's going to happen. And so I think, yes, there are odds and there are probabilities, but at the end of the day, they are just odds and they are just probabilities. And from the Warriors standpoint, yes, they have the best chance to win. They will probably win this year, but if you went on odds alone, then I wouldn't be in the NBA. And if you went on probabilities alone, then I wouldn't be standing here today with a global platform. And so I think that's the whole point of living life and playing sports and playing games is you're not so much focused on how great your opponent is or the probability or the odds. You are trying to be the best version of you, and you are trying to, which is, again, when I say I want to be a great basketball player, I'm not trying to stack up to somebody else. I'm not trying to even beat somebody else. I'm just trying to be the best version of me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, a question here.
Hello, Jeremy. Thanks for your sharing.
Thanks.
God bless.
I've never
can I
seen
have-
someone wear my jersey like that. But
Yeah,
that's
we might-
tight.
Will my do me a favor to have a little grateful little thing do on my jersey to sign it tonight for me?
Is that the question?
Yeah, first question. Actually,
You remember what C was on the ABC, right?
Okay, let's get to the question.
yeah, my second question. Actually, I'm the captain of medical college basketball team.
Oh,
come
then I better sign your jersey.
Yeah, I came tonight with my good teammate Edward. He had a terrific basketball league season this year. Really good player, but he had a bad knee injury last week, so this season was gone. His knee is still swollen. He came in tonight with crutch. Would you mind say some words of encouragement to him, Edward?
Yeah, wait, where are you at? Oh, yeah. Sorry to hear about that, but wait, why is everyone laughing? I'm genuinely sorry about that. Yeah, about your knee injury. But I'm hoping that what I shared tonight it was like a 30-minute encouragement for you. Even in those situations, like if there's anyone who knows how you're feeling, it's me. So we're fighting that same battle, trying to find that same peace and fill that void in our hearts. And so I'll be rooting for you.
Okay, remember the ABCs. Okay, question.
Hello, Jeremy. Thank you for your sharing. And as you have described, I think you found that life is much bigger than basketball. So I want to ask you, what's in life after basketball for you?
For me, I have a foundation, which is I went to, in college, I studied econ and sociology primarily so that I could be great with my foundation if I ever had one, or be able to do nonprofit work, understanding why communities are the way they are, how do you help poor communities, things like that. And so that's what I'm going to spend a lot of my attention on. I could see myself doing other things, on the side, and maybe, a couple, being a part of some TV shows. I like making funny YouTube videos, as you've seen, or things like that. Maybe a little bit of sharing my story. I don't know if I would be like a public speaker, but more just like today, like kind of just sharing my story, my experiences. I feel like there's a few things on the table for me, but definitely my foundation.
Thank you. Maybe you'll start a professional esports team like Jay Cho.
I already have. I have a VGJ, so we have won't bore you guys. I have a China team and a North America team, and they're both doing pretty well right now, and could potentially be at TI. So, yeah, that's already happened.
Cool. Question here.
Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to bring the question a little bit in another direction. Do you have a girlfriend? Are you going to get married?
A, B, and C. I mean, that's the goal, but again, people ask me this a lot, when and why not, and why haven't you, and yeah, it's not really one of those things that you just walk down the street and you're like, I'm gonna get married today, let's make it happen. So in God's timing.
I'm sure a lot of girls are waiting for that.
A question here.
Hello, Jeremy. I have two questions. First, I want to ask for your downs, up and downs, and on the downs, did you ever criticize God for the downs? And if you do, how do you overcome that? And the second question is, for those, sorry, forgot. Sorry.
It's cool.
Just-
Don't worry.
just
That
the
first one was a
is
good
okay.
question. Yeah. Honest. Yes. I think everybody, doesn't matter how, faithful or whatever. There will be times where you ask really tough questions. And I think I would compare it to maybe when I fight with my parents. Maybe we disagree, but at the end of the day, we always get back to a place of everything my parents are doing come from a place of love. And I think that's kind of what I meant when I said perfect love casts out fear, in the sense that, like, even in my greatest times of complaint or criticism, or when I'm yelling or screaming at God, I know that his love is the source of everything that happens in my life. And so even if it's not what I want to see, when I let go of my emotions and calm down a little bit, I get back to understanding that, hey, he loves me, and he wouldn't give me something if it wasn't ordained or out of his love. And that's something that I've always held on to in a lot of situations in my career.
Yes, and for the second question, being in draft, did this fact and ever makes your career different?
You're saying being in the
draft?
Undrafted?
Yes.
It's just a microcosm of kind of my career, or growing up in the States, being Asian and playing basketball, in the sense that just like, maybe fighting a little bit harder for everything I got, and not always getting that opportunity the first time around. I personally felt like in my draft workouts, I played more than well enough to get drafted, but I didn't think a lot of teams were ready to, maybe didn't fully believe it yet. And but I think, again, part of my story, I embrace it. I don't mind it. At the time, I was pissed. I went right after the NBA draft. Me and my family went to Wingstop and ate 100 wings because I was so angry. And but it's a true story. I was so upset that no one chose me. I just couldn't understand it. But again, it's part of the story, right?
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
Question here.
Hi, Jeremy. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you for sharing. I know you've been undrafted, and you even slept on Landry Field's couch during the time you play Knicks, and then you're now an all-rounder player in Brooklyn Nets. So what's your advice to young players who know they got that potential, but who yet to be recognized by coaches, but really want to step up that game and want to kind of rather to get that rotation and get some more minutes?
My high school coach has a very prominent saying that always rings in my head, and he always has said the cream will always rise to the top, meaning that the cream will always, that's self-explanatory. But what it really means is the best will always, over time, it may take longer, it may not be right away, but the best will always get to the top and show that they are the best. And so if a player is the best and they're not showing, and they're not in a position right now to fully showcase that, the cream will always rise to the top is kind of what I think about. Even today or whatever, I've thought about that many times in my career, of like feeling unappreciated or not feeling like I've had maybe the circumstances to allow me to reach my fullest potential. But even in those moments, you can't just blame everybody else, right? Like you have to, like for me, it was like, all right, well, I think I can be deserving of more playing time or having more plays run for me, but it's not. So what am I going to do about it? How am I going to get better? How am I going to improve? The more time I spend complaining about somebody else, the less time I spend improving myself. And so that's something that I would say to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question here.
First of all, my son happens to be named Jeremy.
That's a tight name.
By chance. My question is, amongst your former NBA teammates, who inspired you the most? Who was the most mentally strong?
That's a good question. I actually would say, I could answer that question, but I think there's a better answer. I played in this, how do you say, it's just like during the lockout, the NBA lockout, I played overseas in this like small tournament, and I played on a CBA team for like 3 or 4 games just to, basically continue to work on my game while the NBA was on the lockout. And I ran into a player on my team called Josh Akognin, and he's a tremendous CBA player. But the conversation that I had with him was basically, how do you have confidence to keep shooting even when you're not making shots? And which is something I really struggled with my rookie year, was like, hey, I don't want to, again, it's playing to not lose versus playing to win. Like, I was playing to not have a bad game and to not make mistakes. But his whole thing was like, hey, the averages will always average themselves out. I know what a good shot is. I've trained really hard. I've worked on these shots. I know I can hit these shots. So I don't really worry so much about if the shot went in. I worry more about whether that shot was a good shot. And if it's a good shot, it means like, I know that I can hit this shot. I know I'm supposed to shoot that shot. And so for me, that's something that I really carried into the next year in New York, was like, and I carry into my career, is like, I could be 0 for 10, but if on that 11th shot, I know it's a shot that I should take, I can make, then I'm going to take it. And whether it goes in or not is not always, you know, the most important thing. And I feel like that was another level of maybe mental fortitude that I had not gotten to. And so when he shared that with me, I was like, you know what, the averages do average themselves out. It's like betting against a casino. At a certain point, the averages will always average themselves out. And so I always try to keep that in mind.
Okay, question here.
谢谢你，豪哥。
你好。
豪哥，I have gained a lot of encouragement and power from your story and your experience. Yeah, and I have two questions, but you could just answer one of them. The question one is: have you ever lose your faith in your heart? The question two is: have you ever lose love?
Are you talking romantically, or like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Or love for other people, or love for the game?
Maybe from your friend or from your girlfriend. Yeah, you can answer just
well, I'm
one
glad
question.
you gave me a choice to choose. I will go with the first question. Wait, hold up. I forgot the first question. What was the first question?
Have you ever lost faith?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would definitely say there are shorter temporary moments where, yes, I didn't feel, yeah, I've lost faith. And maybe one example is when I cleaned out my locker in Houston. And I was like, you know what, this isn't for me, this isn't right. Like, you've got this whole thing wrong, you are mistaken, this is not where I'm supposed to be. So in definitely moments, and there have been moments where I was gonna quit, but my family and friends didn't let me, and made me continue to play on. And so definitely times where, you know, you lose faith. I don't think the most important thing is to be superhuman and never lose faith. I think it's getting yourself back to a place where you regain that faith and you are able to continue, which is kind of the whole point of this thing is, you know, it's called Never Done, is how do you have that never done mentality? And even to, you know, what you're saying is there are times where you will feel like being done, but how do you get yourself back to a place where you continue to fight on?
Okay. Jeremy, how many more questions can you take? What's your energy level like? Well, it's about, it's 9:34.
Oh, okay. So we're a little bit over, so maybe I'll just take 5 more questions.
5 more, okay.
Cool.
Okay.
Sorry for everybody standing in line, but basically the first 3 on this side and then 2 on that side. I'm really sorry.
Okay.
Hello, Jeremy. As I'm also connected with the power source as well, I hope to recharge you. So I prepared the eye drop and the throat soothing candy for you, as you have answered lots of our questions. So I hope your voice will never done as well, and your eyes will, as your cup never run dry. So I will send it to you later. And my first question is, if you step out of this room today, if you meet Jesus today, what will be your question?
Whew, that's a heavy hitter. But yeah, you can actually pass the. You said there's candy?
No, I choose the little, the most.
No, you don't have to.
candy.
But honestly, you don't have to send it. We'll just get. I know I have a few of my friends and team members around, but someone will come find you and grab it.
I know Josh's fans.
Oh, there it is. Look at that. The question I would ask him. The first question I would ask him is, how did I do? And in the Bible, you know, there's a passage that talks about, you know, God saying, well done, my good and faithful servant. And so that's something that I think a lot about is if I saw Jesus face to face today, what would he say to me? And so that would be my first question is, how did I do? Hopefully I lived. I'm not asking to be perfect. I'm not asking that he expects me to be perfect. I'm just hoping that I did what I could with what I was given.
I guess you have really tried your best, so just don't put too much pressure on yourself.
Oh, don't worry. I'm feeling pretty. I'm very joyful every day. It's not like, yeah. Thanks, Mom.
Question here.
Okay. Hi, Jeremy. Thanks for your sharing. Jeremy, imagine there's a time tunnel. You now go back.
I can tell why this is the Harvard of Hong Kong. You guys are seriously intellectual questions. But
Yeah.
continue with the
Okay.
time warp tunnel.
Okay, you go back. Which parts of your life or basketball life you would like to start again?
Are you saying to relive or to retry over?
Retry over.
I would say the first 5 years of my NBA career, my biggest regret in my entire life, is that my first 5 years, I was so focused on what I wanted to achieve that I wasn't able to enjoy what I had. And so if I could relive those 5 years, I would definitely enjoy every moment. Even for me, enjoying this rehab process has been a very big goal because I know I've wasted so much time not enjoying the blessings that God has given me. And for me to be in the NBA and to not appreciate that will forever be my life's biggest regret. I hope I don't do anything worse than that.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're adding a sixth question. I see you.
Question here.
Hi, big fan of yours. Came all the way from Korea to see you.
Wait, you flew from Korea for this event?
Yeah.
You're a beast. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, my question is, you've been the leader throughout your life in the game of basketball. You're like the point guard, you're the go-to guy. So like, what is your mindset and what do you tell your team as a leader in the court that like to be confident to win the game against the teams that are like evaluated to be better than yours?
I would say the job of every leader is to make the people around them better. Not for you to be the best version of yourself. That actually isn't the definition of a leader. I think the best leaders are the ones who make everyone around them better. And so for me, what that looks like is to try to instill confidence in each and every single one of my teammates, but I see each person as a different puzzle. And so to solve this puzzle requires a different answer than to solve that puzzle. Some players, I can get super animated and yell at them, and that's how I get the best out of them. Other players, it's a very soft tone, and it's a very, I'm catering to you. How are you feeling? I know you're upset. How can I help you? Can I get you a play? Can I get you the ball on the block? Where do you want it? Do you want it on the left wing? You want it on the left block? So each person is a different puzzle, and there's a different way to get the best out of each person. And so that's what I think about. And honestly, even there's been times when I've been down 30 in a game, but the whole point is you're still trying to get the best out of your teammates. So, okay, we're down 30 with a minute and a half left. We all know we're going to lose, but how do we, in this minute and a half, make sure that we don't waste it? And how can we get better? Because I'm going to tell you one thing. I've seen stuff happen in the last minute or 2 minutes of a blowout game that unlocks something that will be helpful and can start a winning streak for the next 7 games. So never trying to waste those opportunities.
Thanks. That was really point guard-like answer. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for flying over from Korea, man.
How many more questions do we have?
We got these 2 and one over here.
All right, okay.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for the amazing talk. You're an inspiration to our generation and to many here in this audience. Everyone's been asking you really profound questions. I just wanted to ask you, who's your favorite teammate of all time? And what is it like to share your love of God with your teammates?
I think, favorite is tough to define. I would say that, some of my closest friends are like Steve Novak, Landry, even, Rondé on my team right now, and other guys I'm still really close with. I think the best teammate, I always consistently say this, the best teammate I've ever had is probably Jared Jeffries and Marvin Williams, because they were the guys who, when someone was really struggling, they would take that guy out to eat. Or when someone wasn't, shooting well, they would be like, hey man, don't ever pass up that shot. But they were the players, they were the glue guys that were consistently aware of everyone else's issues and just trying to keep the team together. So it just depends how you define that question.
Question here.
So I have two questions. First one, during your rehab process, have you ever lost that peace that you talked about? And if yes, how did you deal with it? Second question, if I'm already happy about my life, why do I need Jesus?
Ooh, yeah, that's a
good one.
Really good question. First question is no, I haven't lost my peace. And for the second question, I would say that there are a lot of situations or a lot of people who may be very happy with what they have today, but that doesn't mean that there will come something that will happen, like potentially a circumstance that will, again, so I guess let me use an analogy. So if your house is built on a not stable foundation, if there isn't a storm around you, you can stand tall and you can be fine. But when that storm comes and you get completely blown over, what is going to happen? And so sometimes people may think like, oh, I'm fine, I'm cool, I'm happy, but I can tell you that's like marriage, right? Like there's times where they get married today, but 40 years down the road, 30 years down the road, when things change, when life change, when things come, and like sometimes it's not even adversity, it's just sometimes time, right? But at a certain point, like I would also, at a certain point, I feel like that void will become more and more apparent. And again, I kind of talked about the two catalysts being completely getting what you think is your, utmost desire, and then having your greatest setback as kind of the two catalysts that have really asked me those tough questions. And I guess the last thing I would say to that is maybe you are very satisfied today, but maybe you don't know that there's you can even live life more fully. And so, I would say, are you familiar with fast food in the States?
Sorry, with what?
Fast food in the States.
Fast food?
Fast food?
Yeah.
So it's like if you ate McDonald's, you're like, McDonald's is good. But then I was like, come to California, try In-N-Out Burger. And you're like, I never knew that there was In-N-Out Burger. I probably don't want to go back to McDonald's. And I know that's like a light-hearted way to share what I'm actually talking about, but that is what I'm talking about, is maybe you are fine with your Big Mac, but you don't realize there's a double animal style that will blow your mind. And so I think that's, how I would probably answer that question.
Thank you.
The last question.
My man.
林書豪先生你好啊，
Oh.
歡迎你嚟到香港啦！我真係好感恩神用你個生命感染咁多人。Oh, sorry. Welcome to Hong Kong. I'm just thankful for how God has been, is, and will continue to use you and your life to just spread His glory, His light, His gospel. So praise God for that. And I personally, on a personal note, I'm really grateful myself. A lot of gratitude towards God for allowing us to have a friendship, because I think for the first time, I'm 36 this year, that I can honestly say that one of my friends is also one of my heroes. So.
I'll make sure I slide you that check.
No check.
No, but
thank you, man. And as an honor to have the final question of the night, I do want to ask you something that I find very serious, and I think a lot of the young people here will agree. Who is your favorite rapper of all time? And you could be honest. You could be honest.
So
my Chinese name is Ouyuan Zheng, by the way. Depending on how you want to answer it. No, be honest though. Of all time, who's your favorite rapper? I do want to know, honestly.
I didn't plant Jin to come and give me that, but I will take some time because he's from here and he has done a great job representing Hong Kong. So when I talked earlier about a charger, that's a charger right there. And I'm serious.
Likewise.
This guy is one of the realest guys, and man, his spirit. When I say like people who come in the room and you just feel joy, you feel their heart. You have a contagious spirit, that charger type thing.
Glory to God.
Yes, sir.
All day,
yes,
bro.
sir. But I think one thing that me and Jin have constantly really resonated on as our friendship has evolved through the years is we've both gone through tremendous highs and also tremendous lows, and we've seen exactly what I was talking about. He knows, just as well, maybe even more. To answer your question, though, and I'm gonna be completely honest.
Please do.
My favorite rapper of all time is probably Drake.
Okay.
But
I'm with that. I'm with that.
You respect my honesty, but
of course.
I will tell you that if I could choose a top 5, and you already know I'm a fan of your music because that's how we met, and I already said that publicly, and so people know I love his music. But one of the top 5, I'm not joking, one of the top 5 songs I have ever heard and will continue to listen to is Like a Rock.
Thank
And
you, bro.
that's by him. So if you haven't heard it, you got to go and hear it. It's on the all-time playlist for me. That is something that Like a Rock, man, when you're going through it.
Well, Jeremy, you know that the motto for Hong Kong U is wisdom and virtue. And you've modeled that for us this evening. So students, this guy should be your role model because really he embodies what Hong Kong U should be about, that knowledge is not just about information, but transformation. And we really believe that leadership is not about just being clever, but having a good character. And you've really shown that today. So thank you so much, Jeremy.
Appreciate it. Thank you guys for your time.
But wait. There is one thing that we haven't done. Did anybody's mobile phone go off today? No, all right. So we still have to do this thing, because I promise. We have this ball. All right. So you have to shout for this, right? The side of the, and includes the back here, whoever makes the loudest noise, Jeremy will throw it there.
All right, here we go.
It's not loud enough. Woo! Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Jeremy Lin. Thank you and good night.